Hi, my name is Marcy. I am a nurse here with Northwestern Medicine, and I work about as far west as you can get with Northwestern Medicine, way out here into Kishwaukee Hospital. And I am teaching in our Leishman Center. It's a culinary teaching kitchen in our hospital. So welcome and thank you for joining us tonight for this program. If you can just type in the chat that you can hear me and see me, just to make sure everything is good. Okay, great. Marla's moderating, so she'll be checking the chat. And okay, I can see some messages coming up too, so it looks like we're good, right, Marla? All right, so today we are talking about eating to manage stress. So how many of you, when you've had a stressful day, you come home, you get in the pantry, you grab the bag of chips, or you grab the 1 pound bag of M&Ms, you sit on the couch, and before you know it, the whole bag is gone. Anybody been there? Guilty. I'm the 1 pound bag of M&Ms, and I can knock those out in no time. Well, tonight I'm not going to talk to you about the healthiest bag of chips that you can eat, but instead I'm going to talk to you about how to incorporate foods that fight stress into your everyday diet. And the good news is there's a lot of them, and you're probably eating some of them or a lot of them now, but we'll try to find ways to maybe incorporate more of them into your everyday diet. So before we get started on the recipes though, we're going to talk a little bit about stress. What is your definition of stress? If you can just type to Marla, what are things that you think could cause stress in people's lives? Just any ideas that you have. I know there's a lot of them.
Job and kids.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Feeling overwhelmed with family, I think I see Marla, is that? Yeah, family.
Yes, family issues, work, etc.
Okay.
Too many tasks, not enough time, long work hours, family demands.
Right, absolutely. So think about all those things that can stress us, and how does it make us feel physically? How do you feel physically when you're stressed out? And then go on and think about how does that impact your life, your relationships, when you're feeling and you're under that kind of stress. It can definitely impact your relationships with other people. Stress is a normal physical response to events that make you feel threatened. And it's your body's way of protecting itself. But beyond a certain point, stress begins to damage your health. It can affect your mood, and it can affect your relationships and your quality of life. So you guys mentioned several common stressors that people would list. Some other ones might be even time management, just those deadlines that we have. We have very demanding schedules, particularly if you have kids. Money can be a stressor if you're trying to pay bills, or maybe you're trying to do projects at your house. Or perhaps you're saving for college or paying for college for kids. School professional trainings, maybe you're going to college, maybe you're going back to achieve some type of certificate that requires time and money. Relationships, multitasking. We are such multitaskers. We never just focus on one thing. We're doing several things at a time. Somebody mentioned our job. Our roles. Many of us are parents. Maybe we're still children too. We have older parents that we are trying to take care of. We are neighbors, we're spouses, we're siblings. So we have a lot of different hats that we wear. Holidays. Holidays are a fun time, but how about they can be very stressful. You know, what are you going to buy people? What are you going to serve? Where are they going to sit? Is the weather going to be good that they can get home for Christmas? People are traveling far. So even happy events can cause stress for us. And of course, we can't forget the most recent, probably the biggest stressor that I've experienced in my lifetime, the pandemic. It's affected all of us in many different ways. And, you know, we're still kind of in the midst, even though I think they've term that we're not in the pandemic anymore. COVID still is impacting our lives in a lot of ways and probably will continue to for a while. So when we encounter a perceived threat, your hypothalamus, which is a tiny region at the base of your brain, sets off an alarm system through your body. And this prompts your adrenal glands, which sit atop of your kidneys, to release a surge of hormones, including adrenaline and cortisol. And these are a couple of the primary stress hormones. And the immediate physical effects of that are that our blood pressure increases, our blood sugar increases, our heart rate increases, it weakens our immune system, and it decreases our kidney function. Now, the really great thing is our bodies were made to respond to these kinds of emergencies. You probably heard that term flight or fight. It's kind of what this is. So our body does this to protect itself. But the problem is if we experience every day as an emergency, then that starts to affect our health and we can be in a lot of trouble. Our bodies aren't designed to handle chronic stress or stress every day at a high level. A good example that I can give you to explain that is if your blood pressure rises to 180 over 100 when you're being chased by a bear, if you're out in the woods or hiking, that's adaptive. But if your blood pressure is raising to 180 over 100 every time you walk by your teenager's messy bedroom, then you're in trouble. You could be heading to a cardiovascular disaster, like a heart attack. So we want to make sure that we do what we can to keep that stress level down. Because the long-term consequences when that stress response system is activated, it can cause overexposure to cortisol and adrenaline, these hormones, and that can disrupt a lot of our body processes. So chronic stress can put us at risk for certain health problems, including anxiety, depression, digestive problems, heart disease, sleep problems, weight gain, memory and concentration issues, and accelerated aging. I don't know about you guys, but I'm aging fast enough. I don't need any more help. So again, we want to do what we can to keep that stress level down. We're always going to have a certain level of stress because we're human. But again, we want it to stay here. It's going to peak at times. Our body is equipped to handle that, and it comes back down instead of our stress level staying up here all the time. And the good news is there's a lot of strategies or tools to manage the stress in our lives. Some of those include laughter, getting together with friends and just laughing. That helps decrease the effect of stress hormones, particularly cortisol. Meditation, deep breathing, and mindfulness. Meditation's gotten a lot of attention, I think, recently. You can find all kinds of things online of how to do different meditations. And really what these are designed to do, these practices, they slow us down and help us just relax and decrease that anxiety. We have included in the handout for you, and I think that was put in the chat by Michelle. Dr. Andrew Weil, he has a breathing exercise. It's called the 4-7-8 breathing technique. And at the end, I'll talk about it a little bit. If we have time, we'll kind of go through that breathing exercise and let you practice it. Deep breathing is free. You can do it anytime, anywhere. It's super easy to do and a good way to just kind of calm yourself down, especially in the moment. Mindfulness. Mindfulness has gotten a lot of attention recently too. Again, I talked about multitasking earlier. We are doing so many things at one time. Like how many of you are listening to me right now, but maybe you're thinking about something you forgot to do at work today or something you have going on this weekend? Mindfulness is being present, fully present in what's happening right in front of you. Not thinking about things in the past, not worrying about things in the future, but being present. And we have a hard time with that. This is something I think we really have to work at. Getting enough sleep is another way to help manage your stress. We typically don't get enough sleep in our lives. We're so busy. So 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night. Drinking plenty of water to stay hydrated. Dehydration can increase the cortisol levels. Again, that stress hormone. Social support is also very important. I think we became increasingly aware of the need for this during the pandemic. A lot of us were isolated, and so we know how important it is to have that social support. So whether it's through friends or family, or if it's professional, it doesn't matter, whatever you need, make sure to reach out for that help to get through those times that are stressful in your lives. Physical activity. It releases serotonin, which is feel-good chemical. So exercise, 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 exercise. I can't say it enough. Exercise really is good medicine. So if you aren't moving at all right now, start. Even if it's, okay, I'm gonna walk 5 minutes by Friday. Great, start somewhere. And then you can build upon that each week. Try to get up to 150 minutes of exercise a week is what's recommended. But again, exercise is one of the best medicines for stress. So let's talk about some foods that can help you beat stress. There's probably a lot of these foods that you're already eating. But again, we want to look for ways to add more of them into your diet, whether it's in your meals or it's in snacks. So the first group of foods you want to try to increase in your diet to help beat stress would be complex carbohydrates. They supply a steady source of serotonin, that feel-good chemical, and they help stabilize our blood sugar. Some examples of these foods would be oatmeal, barley, rye, quinoa. Quinoa, if you're not familiar with, I love it. I use it a lot in cooking at home. It's a complete protein. When you're using it, you want to make sure that you rinse it off in a fine strainer. The reason that you need to do that is it has a natural coating called saponin, and that can taste a little bit bitter. That helps protect the grain, but it can taste a little bit bitter. So if you rinse it, that'll take that off, and that bitterness away. Quinoa is very filling. It's very hearty. When you cook it, it's a 1-to-2 ratio. One part quinoa to 2 parts water. So it's a relatively quick cooking grain. Other examples would be whole grain cereals, whole grain bread or pasta or rice. So by that, I mean the brown bread, the brown rice, the brown pasta. And if you aren't eating that right now, sometimes it can be difficult to switch over, kind of start making it half and half. I know when my kids were younger and I was trying to introduce this to our family and into our diets, my kids were like, what is that brown stuff? It doesn't look right. And so I started making like half white and half the brown pasta, mixing it together, and eventually transition them over to the whole wheat. So that's how you can kind of do that with your families if need be. Vitamin C is another group, food that you can introduce into your diet or eat more of to beat stress. It increases serotonin, that healthy brain chemical, and it also boosts your immune system. I think we saw a lot during the pandemic. They were recommending people take vitamin C, and they were giving it to patients. Again, that boosting your immune system. Some fruits that are high in vitamin C would be cantaloupe, citrus fruits. So you're talking about your oranges, your lemons, your limes, grapefruits, kiwi fruits, mango, papaya, pineapples, and then your berries, your strawberries, your raspberries, your blueberries. Vegetables that are high in vitamin C would include your peppers, your bell peppers, your yellow, your green, and your red. They have a lot of vitamin C in them, so they're a really good source. Broccoli, Brussels sprouts, and cauliflower. So those cruciferous vegetables are high in vitamin C. Spinach, cabbage, kale are dark leafy greens, and we're going to use some of those tonight in one of our recipes. Sweet potatoes and white potatoes. I think potatoes kind of get a bad rap because of the carbs in them, but I think oftentimes it's what we do to the potatoes that make them so unhealthy. So if you're just roasting potatoes and cutting them, eating them, keep the skins on, you get fiber and more nutrients with the skin. So potatoes can be a healthy food in our diets as well, and a good source of vitamin C. Tomatoes and tomato juice also provide a lot of vitamin C. And then we have our winter squashes, so like our butternut, our acorn squash would be a good source of vitamin C. The next group would be omega-3 fatty acids. These can help prevent surges in stress hormones. They're also good for our heart health. They support the building of mood-boosting chemicals like dopamine and serotonin. So these are a good thing to add into your diet. Some good food sources of omega-3 would be salmon, halibut, sardines, flaxseed. We want to use this ground, and you'll be seeing this pretty soon. I'm going to put it in one of the recipes. You can buy it whole seeds, but if you consume flaxseed in the whole seed, it can go right through your digestive system, so you're not getting the health benefits. But by buying the ground, or you can grind the seeds yourself in a coffee grinder, then that helps your body be able to absorb and get the full benefit, the health benefits from it. So ground flaxseed. Chia seeds, I don't know if that's something that you use or you're familiar with. Chia seeds too are a good source of omega-3s. I like to eat them on like my avocado toast. I put some on top. They're crunchy that way. You got to watch, they can kind of get stuck in your teeth, so be careful with that. But if you put them into liquid, they become kind of gelatinous. And so they're just a different texture, but I like the texture, whether they're softened or whether they're crunchy. So if it's something you haven't tried, then maybe check it out. You can find flaxseed and chia seeds in the Health Mart at a lot of the grocery stores. I know Aldi carries them now too, so it doesn't mean you have to be spending a lot of money for these kinds of things. And you get bags that'll last you for quite a while. And I keep my flaxseed in the freezer, so it lasts quite some time, and I can take it out and use it whenever I want it. Some other sources of omega-3s would be your nuts, pecans, walnuts, almonds, pine nuts, and pumpkin seeds or pepitas would be another name for that. So if anybody has any questions at any point, just make sure to let us know. Marla will be monitoring that. The last, magnesium is another, helps regulate our cortisol. So a good mood boosting foods. You want to have foods with a high magnesium content to help with that, regulate that cortisol. So some of these foods would include spinach, almonds, peas, sweet corn. We live in the Midwest. I grew up, my dad was a farmer and he grew sweet corn. We have the best access to fresh sweet corn here. So we have that to look forward to in late summer, early fall coming. Broccoli would be another food with magnesium, oatmeal or porridge. Again, your flaxseed, cashews, bananas, and avocados. So just type into Marla, do you guys eat a lot of these foods already in your diets? Are some of these new foods to you? Thinking you probably already do include some of them. So again, maybe thinking about how to increase them in your diet. So I'm going to show you a couple recipes that use some of these foods to boost your mood. The first recipe that we're going to make is a baked carrot cake oatmeal. So something you can have for breakfast. I make a lot of baked oatmeal at home. I'll eat it for lunch as well. So we'll start out by, well, the ingredients that we're going to use, I'll kind of go through that first. We're going to use rolled oats. So a lot of times in these classes, whether I'm teaching or I'm moderating, there's always questions about oats. They're, remember, a good source of the complex carbohydrates and magnesium, so that's why they're good for boosting your mood. But rolled oats would be the same as old-fashioned oats, okay? The husk is removed from the oat, and then the oat is steamed and it's flattened between heavy rollers, and then the oat is dried. And when it dries, this adds flavor, and it also deactivates an enzyme that the oat has that can cause the oats to go rancid. So that's kind of how these are processed. So quick oats and rolled oats can be used interchangeably in most recipes and can be used in this recipe. The quick oats are a little rolled a little thinner, they're a little smaller, so they're a little more processed and they quick faster than the old-fashioned oats. and instant oats would be even smaller yet and cook the fastest. Steel cut oats, they are processed in a different way. They're not as highly processed as the old-fashioned oats, but sometimes people will say, can I use those in these recipes? And you could, I have not tried them in these. I generally just use the old-fashioned oats. Steel cut oats are not steamed, they're not rolled, they're cut, and so they take longer to cook because of that unprocessed nature. They're more chewy, and because they're not dried, rolled and steamed, rolled and then dried, they don't deactivate that enzyme that can cause the oat to go rancid. So you probably want to use steel cut oats more quickly. Maybe sources I've read have said, within like a month or so, try to use those. So you can experiment and try, but the old-fashioned or quick oats is what we'll be using tonight in our recipe. We'll be adding some cinnamon, baking powder, a little sea salt, and we're going to be using carrots tonight, grated carrots, okay? I went ahead and grated these earlier today just to save on time a little bit, but just an old-fashioned box grater is what you can use. We use the larger section to grate in a little bigger pieces. Smaller is fine too, whatever you prefer. So just grating those carrots up. You can wash them. You don't even have to peel them. If you wash your carrots, you can just grate them right from there. You don't have to peel them at all. All right. We're also going to be using some milk in the recipe. You can use whatever kind of milk that you like to use at home. You can use cow's milk. We're going to be using unsweetened almond milk tonight. And this can be purchased in the refrigerator section in your most all grocery stores now. And sometimes it comes in a bigger container there or a jug. I don't tend to go through that much because I use it mainly for cooking or baking. So you can find boxes like this on the shelf. I've also seen smaller little cartons. They come in a pack of 4. That's usually what I buy. When I make baked oatmeal, then I don't waste as much. And they have other kinds of milk in this are on the shelf as well. So whatever kind of milk you use in your home, you can use in this recipe, okay? And then we'll be putting a little bit of vanilla in it and also some ginger. You can use fresh ginger that you grate yourself, or you can use the ground ginger. We'll be using ground ginger tonight. Fresh ginger, it's easy to use. You can buy little pieces, but I tend to use a little bit and I throw it in the freezer. I kind of forget about it and I end up wasting it. So I'm using the ground tonight, but I just learned about something else when I was in the kitchen today with one of our other instructors that I had not seen before. And it's something called ginger juice. Maybe you've heard of it, but I had not. So I was kind of excited about this. And it is the ratio, if you're using, if the recipe calls for grated ginger, fresh ginger, our recipe calls for 1.5 teaspoons today, I would be using an equivalent amount of this juice, so 1.5 teaspoons of the juice. If you're using the ground ginger, it's more potent, so you're going to use less of that. So you would use 0.5 teaspoon of the ground ginger. So that's actually what I had measured out to put in the recipe before I found out about this. But this actually is stored in the refrigerator. I'm assuming once you open it, it goes in the fridge. So I think I'm gonna try this at home. I'm excited to have that in my kitchen and try it out. We will also be adding some chopped nuts that will help increase and add omega-3 fatty acids. And again, we're going to add a little flaxseed to this recipe as well for those omega-3s and that magnesium. So let's go ahead and start putting it together. I'm going to get a bowl. And to this, I preheated my oven to 375. So that's getting ready to go. And then we're going to mix together the oats. So 2 1/4 cup of our old-fashioned oats. We're going to go in here. Mix the dry ingredients. We're going to add our cinnamon. Okay. So we've got cinnamon in there. And then we're gonna add our baking powder. So 1.5 teaspoons of cinnamon, 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder. And then we have about 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Just measure that out here. And then we have our ground ginger. So I'm going to add that into the dry ingredients. And I'm just going to give that a little stir together. Ginger, it's very fragrant, so I wish you could smell it. It smells really good in here. And we'll even smell better after we get baking this. Okay, I'm going to set that aside for just a minute. And then we're going to get our wet ingredients together. Okay, so we're going to add our shredded carrots into here, 1.5 cups of shredded carrots, and they're just kind of lightly packed in the measuring cup here. And our carrots have vitamin C in them. 3.5 ounces of carrots provide about 7% of the daily value, or the amount of vitamin C that we need on a daily basis, and that's based on a 2,000 calorie diet. So when you look at that percent daily value on your recipe labels, if you're looking for an ingredient and you want a good source of that ingredient, you want that percent daily value to be 5 or above. Okay, if it's under 5, then it's not bad to have. It's just not a high source of vitamin C or whatever component that you're looking at. So 5 or above, all right, if you're looking to make sure you're getting that vitamin or mineral in your diet. All right, and then we're going to add a little bit of maple syrup for sweetness. The carrots will give it a little bit of sweetness too. So 1/3 of the cup of maple syrup. And then we're going to add some vanilla. So 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract, and we use the pure vanilla in the kitchen here. Measuring over the bowl. When I teach my kids to cook at home though, I teach them to do it over another dish in case they spill. And then we're going to add our milk in. Again, we're using the almond milk. Pour that in. Marla had that all measured out for me. Okay, we're just going to stir that up a little bit. Then we're going to take and we're going to add the wet ingredients to the dry ingredients. So I'm just going to pour that in carefully. And I'm going to give it a little stir. I don't want to over mix, but just get it all mixed together. And it'll look kind of runny, like there's a lot of liquid in it. But again, those oats are really going to soak that up, okay? Okay. Then we're going to take and we're going to use a 9x9 pan. The recipe says to line it with parchment paper. You can or you don't have to. I don't often line my baking pans at home. We made a batch earlier today, so we did use the paper then. If you're gonna use these as cut them into bars, which they will get solid enough that you can do that after they bake and they cool. So you can cut it into bars and freeze them. Then you might want to put the parchment paper in to help kind of lift them out of the pan, and I'll show you that pretty soon. But otherwise, if you're just gonna eat it scoop it out of the pan to eat it, then you can just use a little olive oil or whatever you use at home to grease the pan. So we use olive oil in here. So I'm gonna spread a little bit of that in the bottom of my pan. So it's prepared. All right, so just the bottom is good. Don't have to worry about the sides. And then I'm gonna pour this in. Right. You want to make sure after you pour it in, kind of press it down with the spoon. So all of the oats are covered with milk or down into the milk. Spread it around so it's even in the pan. I'm going to take and I'm going to sprinkle some of the walnuts on top. So I kind of chop those up a little bit. You can leave them whole or chop them up, whatever your preference is. Just scatter them over the top. Again, we're increasing those mood boosting foods. And then I'm going to take just a little bit of flax and I'm going to sprinkle that over the top. Probably maybe a teaspoon or two of the flax. It will soak up a little bit of the liquid too, so you want to watch and not put too much. And this is the ground flax that we put in the coffee grinder earlier today. Again, that's it. Super simple. I'm going to put this into the oven and we'll bake it about 32 or 37 minutes. I'll let Arla set the timer for me. And again, I have my magic kitchen here. So how about that? I have the carrot cake oatmeal bars to show you. Again, we put the parchment paper in, so I'm just going to lift them out of the pan onto my board here so you can see them. Just going to put a few on the plate. The one that's in the oven now, when I take it out, it will be a little soft in some places and not as solid, but you can see as they cool, they really set up into a nice firm bar. So you can wrap these individually and you can freeze them and store them in an airtight container. That way you can pull them out when you want them. And if you're gonna freeze them, I would take them out and wrap them, put them in a pot on the stove with about 1/3 of a cup of milk. Again, whatever kind of milk that you typically use at home. Put the lid on and just slowly heat the bar up. And then you can kind of break it up and stir it up and you'll have a nice fresh bowl of oatmeal that smells really good. I can smell the cinnamon, the ginger in these. I can see the carrots. If you guys can see that in there. So I think they look really delicious. Again, you can eat these for breakfast. You can eat them for lunch. I will make baked oatmeal and just eat on it out of the refrigerator for breakfast all week long. So it's a really good, quick, handy thing to have around. And again, you're grabbing healthy foods and foods that can help boost your mood and help maybe reduce that stress. All right. Any questions about that recipe? Again, pretty simple. Smells like cake, actually, like you're eating carrot cake. All right, I'm going to take a minute and just clean my station here so we can move on to the next recipe then, okay?
I agree, Marcy. Perfect for breakfast.
Great. Yeah, let us know if you have any questions, but it's a pretty simple recipe.
It looks delicious, and I love carrot cake.
Mine It's the cream cheese frosting here, though. It'll help you. I hope you'll try it at home. All right.
Looks very good.
Okay, the next thing we're gonna make is a sun-dried tomato, kale, and white bean skillet. All right, so we're gonna be using a can of beans. The recipe is written for garbanzo beans, which are chickpeas, same thing. I like garbanzo beans, I use them a lot, but when I was kind of looking at the labels, you really can use any white bean for this recipe. You could use a Great Northern bean, a cannellini bean, a baby lima bean, a navy bean. So since we're talking about foods that help beat stress, I was looking at the magnesium content of the beans and that percent daily value, percent DV, that you can find on the label. I can't see this one, but it's right here along the edge. And the garbanzo beans are 4%. So they have magnesium, but again, remember I told you we want that number to be 5 or above would be a better source of magnesium. So when I looked at the can of the Great Northern beans, it's 10% daily value. So that's pretty good source of magnesium. So I decided to go ahead and use these beans in our recipe today, but any of them would be fine to use, all right? And beans are a good source of protein as well. And you want to rinse and drain those beans. We usually cook with beans that are low in salt in the kitchen. You can find those in the store. Some of the stores will have different colored labels that denote which vegetables are the lower sodium. So they're real easy to spot. But you can read the labels, and you really do have to be a good detective because some of the marketing tools they use can be kind of tricky. I know when you look at broths, you know, it'll say low sodium or no added sodium. You really have to read. Some of those, they have very different amounts, and your canned vegetables are the same. If you are buying canned vegetables that aren't low sodium, that's okay. No worries, you can, by rinsing them, you're going to rinse off a lot of that sodium. So just make sure you rinse them and drain them, all right? And that will help reduce the sodium. Sodium, of course, we want to limit our sodium. It can lead to high blood pressure and heart problems, heart disease. So that's why we want to kind of be cognizant of the amount of sodium that we're consuming. All right, we're also going to be using some sun-dried tomatoes in this recipe. And we have, ours are julienne cut, so they're cut in real thin strips, and it has Italian herbs and olive oil. Okay, so these sometimes I find them by the produce, sometimes in the Italian aisle. I think I've seen them, Marla, anywhere else that you've?
I've seen them more in the produce than anything else.
Sometimes they can be a little tricky to find. You can find them packed in the oil, or you can find them in bags. I have seen them in just like the little plastic containers in the produce section too, the hard kind of plastic containers that you might get blueberries in, like a container like that in the produce section. But we're going to use some of the oil that are the tomatoes are packed in for this particular recipe. All right. And we'll be using a little salt and pepper, a little olive oil, some garlic. So let's talk about garlic for a minute. You're probably all familiar with garlic. I don't know if you use fresh garlic at home or not. The garlic, you should make sure to, when you're buying it, give it a little squeeze and make sure that it's firm, all right? You shouldn't be able to smell a fresh garlic bulb. You shouldn't be able to smell it until you open it up and actually cut into the garlic. If you can smell it at the store like this, then it's probably not so good inside for you to use. It could be sprouting, or sometimes you bring it home, you put it in the cabinet. I store it in with like my onions and potatoes because it should be in a cool, dry place. And sometimes it'll start sprouting at home. You don't have to get rid of it, just cut that off and use it. But if you see in the store it's sprouting, that means it is a little older and maybe you want to put it back and pick a fresher piece. Garlic comes as a head or a bulb, and then it contains cloves, okay? And it will usually have several cloves. Here's an example of one clove of garlic. So sometimes people get a little confused by that. So what you do is, our recipe calls for 2 cloves of garlic, so I would just break off 2 cloves. And then I generally, when I cut my garlic, I smash it with a knife. That makes it easy to peel this papery skin off of it. And then you can just chop it up as fine as you like. I have mine diced pretty thin for this recipe. I like things kind of cut in smaller pieces when I eat them. Some people like things in bigger chunks, so however you prefer it, that's fine, but we're just going to mince that up a little bit for our recipe today. And here's a product of what that looks like. You can also get minced garlic in a jar if this isn't something you want to mess with keeping at home. You know, the stuff in the jar works just as well, so that's fine too. But it does add a lot of flavor to it, all right? And you can add more garlic if you like more, if you like the taste of it. We're also going to be using kale today. All right, so kale, dark leafy green, this is really good for us. If you haven't used kale before, it can be a little bitter if you're just eating it raw like this. It's thicker, there's different types of kale, and we're just using a basic kind of curly kale today. So I'm going to show you real quick in case you don't know. But when you get a bunch of kale, you're just going to wash it off and let it air dry. And then you can eat the stems of the kale. Some recipes will call for those and just to chop them up, but they are kind of woody and you're going to have to cook them a lot more. Most people don't like them as well, and a lot of recipes just call for using the leaves. But so an easy way to get the leaves off, you're just going to hold at the top and then you're going to pull down and just kind of slide that stem off. And then you're left with the leafy part here, okay? So super simple if you haven't done it before. Just really easy, strip it down. And sometimes it comes off better than others. Good way to get rid of that firm part. And we'll just toss that today. Right. In my bowl here for now. All right, so let's begin to build this recipe. We have our white beans and we have rinsed and drained those. Okay. Next, we're going to take the sun-dried tomatoes. And we want about 2 tablespoons of the tomatoes here. So I'm going to pull those out. I love sun-dried tomatoes. I use them at home in my eggs a lot. Scrambled eggs, a little goat cheese and sun-dried tomatoes. I use them in pasta. I make sun-dried tomato pesto and use with my pastas. So I really like them. And you can kind of, don't have to be exact with measuring this. So see, they're julienne, so they're cut in little small strips. So I don't think I really need to even do anything to these before I add them to my skillet. I was thinking I might need to chop them up a little bit with a knife, but I think they look pretty good now that I have them out. So let's put together a little bit of the dressing for the kale salad. And we're going to start with about a tablespoon of the oil from the sun-dried tomatoes. And again, this has some olive oil with a little bit of herbs and seasoning in there to give it some flavor. Okay, then we're going to take a tablespoon of the apple cider vinegar. So oil, we're going to add a little acid to it. If you don't use apple cider vinegar at home, you can probably use regular vinegar as well. Do the trick. Okay, and then we're going to add a little salt. salt here. And I often watch how much salt I'm using, but we don't really have a lot of other sodium in this recipe. Most of the sodium that we consume in our diet comes from processed foods, not what we add at home. And even the tomatoes, they have 20 milligrams of sodium for a serving, so that's not really too much. So I am going to add a little pinch of salt to this. And we'll add a little pepper as well, a little crushed ground pepper. We're just gonna give that a little stir. We're just gonna set that aside for a minute till we're ready to use it. Okay. So the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna give that kale a little bit of a rough chop because some of it is still a little big. And so we're gonna put that on our board. And again, keeping my hand on top of the knife, I'm just going to give this a little bit of a rough chop here. We're just using one bunch of kale for this recipe. The kale, again, the dark leafy green, so we're getting a good source of vitamin C. This recipe, vitamin C with the tomatoes. Again, you don't have to be exact with this, okay? All right, then we need to put a couple of, turn this a little bit so you can see the skillet too. A couple of teaspoons of oil in the skillet. And again, I'm using olive oil, more heart healthy. All right, I'm just going to turn my burner on. And to about medium, low medium. Heat that oil up a little bit, and then we're going to saute the garlic, the minced garlic in there. You really want to be careful when you're sauteing garlic. It can burn really easily, so you just really have to watch it. And you're just going to cook that for about a minute, or until it gets fragrant and you can start smelling it, okay? And again, just being really careful not to burn it. And then we're gonna add in our tomatoes, kale, and let that kale wilt and cook down. And to smell that oatmeal bacon in the oven too. It's smelling good in here. Okay, I can start smelling the garlic now. So now we're going to go ahead and add the kale. And it says to add about 2 teaspoons of water as well. While that kale cooks, I'm going to add that in. Just going to kind of stir that and let that heat up. Garlic kind of infuse into it. If you use kale at home in your cooking, I tend to use it in soups. A lot of times I'll put it in there to add the greens into it. My family likes kale salads. Sometimes the kale in the salads, again, can be a little bitter. If you put a little olive oil and massage the kale, that can help with that. Turn up my heat just a little bit here. If you don't like kale, some people don't, you could also use spinach. You would get the same mood boosting benefit from spinach. Spinach is going to wilt a lot faster than the kale, so just watching that. And really, you can get it to kind of the texture that you want. I like any of my vegetables that I cook to still be a little bit crispy. My husband likes them cooked until they're mush, because that's just kind of what he grew up with. So I tend to take mine out of the pan when they get to the doneness that I like and let his keep cooking longer. So I'm gonna bring this over, I think, a minute, so you can see that it really is starting to become a real vivid green. It's wilting down. It's doing what I want. Right. And then lastly, we're going to add in the beans. So a can of the beans. And then I'm going to grab those sun-dried tomatoes as well. Actually, it's really pretty with the red and the bright green colors. Okay. Stir that around. Just make sure we get it heated through, that we get the beans heated and the tomatoes heated. And then don't forget our dressing that we made earlier with the oil, salt and pepper, a little vinegar. Just going to drizzle that on top. It's done. So smells delicious. Again, how beautiful that is with the pops of the red in there and the bright, real vivid green and the white beans. You can eat this just as is. Some other ideas would be to, you could add some extra omega-3 fatty acids to it by sauteing or toasting some pine nuts and sprinkle on top. That'll give it a little texture as well. You could also split a russet potato or a sweet potato and scoop these vegetables in as a filling in the potato. You could cook up some whole wheat pasta, brown rice, farro, barley, whatever kind of grain you like, and add a big heaping spoonful of this to make more of a hearty, filling meal. You could eat this alongside a piece of whole grain toast for breakfast. It's best if it's served warm, but you can eat it cold as well. You can put it in the fridge and reheat it the next day. It's not, it might be, it's probably better if it's fresh. Those greens are going to get a little softer if you're reheating. But again, there's a lot of possibilities or ways that you can utilize this in your diet. So I hope that you'll give it a try as well. And again, both of these recipes contain a lot of those mood boosting foods in them to help us beat that stress. Because again, we're not going to eliminate the stress in our lives, but we can certainly help reduce it and keep it at the lowest level possible. So those are the two recipes that I have for you tonight. You'll also see in the handout that you were given, there's some snack ideas. So stress relieving foods you can use as snacks. Walnuts or almonds, when you're crunching those and you're crunching with your jaw, you're releasing tension. You're also getting the omega-3s in those. A clementine, it fits in your palm, easy to peel, you're getting vitamin C. Raw carrot sticks or cucumbers, again, that releasing that tension in the jaw, crunching on those. An avocado, you're getting magnesium, and you can fill it with a salsa. That way you're getting vitamin C with the vegetables, and a half a cup of salsa equals a serving of vegetables for the day. whole grain bread with avocado on it, sliced peppers for a snack. Again, good source of vitamin C. You can mix dry oats and nuts and some dried fruit in a jar. You can just eat that as a snack. You could sprinkle it over yogurt, sprinkle it over oatmeal, and eat that. And you have the 4-7-8 breathing exercise from Dr. Andrew Weil. Again, this is a simple exercise. It takes virtually no time. It can be done anywhere. It's like a natural tranquilizer for the nervous system. We know when we take drugs, they can begin to be less effective and lose their power over time. These breathing exercises, they're subtle and they kind of might seem awkward at first, but they can actually gain power with repetition and with practice. So they're a great thing to do. We recommend using it if you're in an upsetting situation. Try out this breathing exercise before you react. You can also use it if you're having trouble falling asleep. Try to do some deep breathing. And basically how it works, I'll just go through real quickly because I know we're almost out of time here, is you are exhaling through your mouth completely and kind of making a whoosh sound. Your mouth is open, so is how it sound. And then you're closing your mouth and inhaling quietly through your nose to a count of 4. You're holding your breath for a count of 7, and then you're slowly exhaling through your mouth to a count of 8. So notice that the exhalation time is double the inhalation time. All right, that 4 to 8. When you do this exercise, you want to put your tongue, the soft tissue, right behind your front teeth and try to keep it there. Again, when you're kind of blowing that air out, it might feel kind of awkward, but the more you practice it, it gets more comfortable feeling. And again, this just helps settle us down, gives oxygen into our system, helps us relax a little bit. So I encourage you to try it out. It's free. You can do it anywhere. Nobody really knows what you're doing. There are a lot of different types of breathing exercises that you can find on the internet. This is just one particular one that we really like. So again, we're going to have some stress in our lives. The key is to try to minimize it. So I hope that you've learned something today about what stress is, how it affects your body, and things that you can eat to maybe help reduce that stress.